What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Longbox Sessions. I'm your host, Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
As always, catch us on all your socials. That's all of your Instagrams, all your Twitters, all your Facebooks. And then, of course, on your favorite podcast platform. Guys, rate, review, and subscribe to our show. Tell your friends about it. My goodness, all the fun we're having.
Especially
listening to Gary Glitter.
Oh, Gary Glitter. We'll get to that perv in a minute. No. Yeah, guys, wherever you find the show, especially on Apple Podcast app, the ratings and reviews are a really nice, simple way that takes only moments. You guys can help the show out. It does mean the world to us. And while you're doing that, do it for the film Alchemist as well. We're knee-deep in our horror movie marathon. All the nightmares, all the Fridays, some cool stuff in theaters. And you can also, you might even be watching us now, the Nerd Alchemist, S, plural S at the end, on YouTube, in case you want to see the massive amounts of hair that the Longbox Session is rocking.
Wow. All right, guys. It's time for us to get down and dirty. That's right. As filthy as 1981 Gotham City can get. Griffey and I went and saw Joker. We're talking about it, man.
That's right.
What a fascinating dive into. I mean, we must have had, I think I counted, I think we had 4 shows dedicated actually to the appearance of this film in movie theaters leading up to it. And now we've seen it. Griff, what are your initial reactions to this movie? I mean, obviously we're recording it after initial reactions, but immediately after you got out of the theater, you were like, I need some time to process what I just saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word is flabbergasted, right? Like, my theater experience was just overwhelming almost, right? Like, from, first off, we got in there, and we had this guy show up, right? Dressed all in black like a Columbine guy, sloppily painted on Joker makeup, obviously for the effect of looking extra insane, doing kind of a weird voice, asking for a bunch of free stuff. He had a Meyer bag. And I was like, who the fuck is bringing like, not like had like a bag of candy, but like a big bulging Meyer bag. And I'm seeing it with my brother who just had leg surgery in a car crash. So I was like, all right, if shit goes down, I can't drag his big ass out of here. Like, I don't, but it was that crazy thing where you're like, because we saw it early.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, thank God nothing has happened really. Like, there's a couple vapors and this and that. And you're like, well, that's to be expected. It's Joker.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's a very jumpy time at the theater. Like, I went and saw it on Sunday night, like real late, and I have I don't know if you guys, I have the Citizen app on my phone that like gives you like alerts of shit that's going on in your neighborhood. And one of the alerts that I was looking up, I just got a buzz, and it was like, oh, shooting. I'm like, oh fuck. Right. And it was like shooting at Sherman Oaks Gallery. I'm like, fuck. Yeah. And then I read it, and then I actually read the post, and it was like, oh, some kid popped a balloon. Like,
fucking little assholes.
We're at a point now, though, where like balloon popping is putting people off in a public place. Like, this movie has touched some nerves. So,
right. But what I would focus on, right, is that I'm just glad nothing bad has happened, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you see this.
Talk about this without having to compartmentalize is great.
It's weird because I just thought I'd mention it. Like, I was legitimately, as the movie starts to break kind of into the full-on madness, I was really uncomfortable in my theater. And it added to my effect. So when I got out, I was just flabbergasted. Like I said, there was so much emotion and processing. I think since I've had it's such an unusual flick, it's kind of exactly where I thought it would be. Yeah,
I mean, I normally sit, like my theater experience is usually I always sit on the side. I like being able to exit. I decided to sit all the way at the back of the theater this time.
Smart.
Because I don't trust people. And I can tell you right now, I heard so in the ArcLight, they have these back exit doors. I heard them open twice, and I got up and checked.
Yeah.
Like, that's how unnerved I was seeing this movie.
But this is the obnoxious part, right? Is there's actually a really fascinating, but I was scared in my theater. You were scared in your theater. The news keeps putting out articles about guys vaping. Some guys started laughing and clapping and made people run out of the theater. Like, it's almost as if they're upset that nothing bad happened, right? So they keep doing this story. So I don't want to partake in that anymore. I just thought it was memorable. I was like, as soon as I saw the Joker guy, I was like, oh boy, here we go. So maybe I was extra on edge, right? I think I spoke to one of my friends who I won't name. I don't know if he'd want me to or not. But yeah, we had a good chat about the movie because there's a lot of stuff to process in this film.
A lot of stuff to process.
Yeah, I think my friend Sam had my favorite review right off the bat where he goes, "This Joker would definitely get beat up worse than any other Joker by Batman."
Well, yeah, because he's a feeble old man by the time Batman's a sprightly 26.
But I think there's something interesting in this, right? Is that, and Todd Phillips now has hinted this isn't actually the Joker, maybe, but a guy who inspired. Whatever, fine. I do think it's a fair point to say.
We'll get to that guy.
Because I'm kind of torn, right? I do think this is. It's in my top 5 favorite comic book movies I've ever seen. I don't know that I would call it a comic book movie, right? Just because it has the Joker and Gotham and a Wayne mentioned. I think comic book movies shifted now as a movie that is derived from a comic book to almost its own genre with its own tropes and expectations. This one's not that. And also, I don't really find this version of the Joker that Joaquin Phoenix is playing to even be the Joker for me. While also saying I think it's my favorite performance of the character. And I think that's the weird headspace I find myself in with this movie. Is there, if you go on Twitter, there's these really wild I mean, obviously it's Twitter, but people saying it's an absolute masterpiece. I've gone 2 or 3 times over the weekend. To other people saying it's a piece of shit that should not even be given time of day. And what I think it is just an ultra fascinating movie that's a bit in between all that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that what it ends up being is, like, it's the truest. Again, they go through every single time, like, character study. Like, that's the word everyone sees. That's, like, the buzzword everyone wants to use. And I'm like, I wonder if anybody actually knows what that means. Like, I looked it up. I honestly looked it up. I'm like, because there's times when those things become, like, catch-all terms. I'm like, all right, let's actually, like, get to the bottom of this. And, like,
that's what people say when they're like, there's no action, but it was good.
Right, exactly. So, like, I watched, and, like, because, like, I think about character studies that I've seen, and, like, as much as, like, I'd say as much as there is plot in, like, a movie like There Will Be Blood, it's pretty much a character study of Daniel Plainview. Like, there's a lot going on there. I think Joker is obviously a character study of this one individual, and but I also think it's an examination of what I would call metropolitan life in general. I think that there's 1,000,001 of these kinds of guys probably who existed in 1980s New York particularly, who were down on their luck, had an issue, had something like that. Like, this is I actually think the story was quite common until obviously, like, he starts painting his face and doing crazy shit. But yeah, it's a fascinating journey into madness, and Joaquin Phoenix is such a great actor to take us there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it would be one of my top 5 favorite superhero movies or comic book films. Like,
honestly, I'm grappling with it in my own mind. I think it's my actual favorite. Like, that's where I've landed after a weekend of thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think that's a bit of a cheat because they're just making a movie that I prefer under the guise of a comic book film. And, you know, they're doing this, here's the Joker. And honestly, it's my favorite performance ever turned in as the Joker while not being the Joker, right? An interesting way that someone phrased this that I thought about, right, is that this movie is, you know, there are those movies when you were in college that have kind of faux philosophical bends, you know, kind of the kind of ideas in them that make really dumb people feel like they're smart because they like the movies, i.e. Fight Club, right? Movies that
Fight
become,
Club,
they
Fight
become
Club, Blue Velvet's like the level up.
How dare you? No, but what it is right, Fight Clubs becomes this, your dumbest friend watches it, thinks he's really smart, and then starts espousing this kind of nonsensical anarchism, right? And someone referred to it as the college dorm syndrome, the college dorm movie poster syndrome.
Sure.
And someone said is that a movie like Fight Club sets out to make a movie, right? And then it gets co-opted into that, you know, dorm wall poster. And Joker is the example of what if that was the intention all along, was to make that movie for those guys. Wow. And I don't know if because this is the thing, I do think Joker gets pretty muddy by the end, right? By the end of it, I'm not sure all the way where I am. And this is the part about it that I separate this out from an actual Joker tale for me, right?
Right.
Because I do think it's twofold. I like the idea of we talked about this on Film Alchemist with Freddy Krueger, right? We've gotten too friendly with Joker.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even Heath Ledger's Joker, we kind of liked him so much, and he won awards, and I think at times we forget how truly scary a character like Joker would be, right? That there are human beings that don't act like human beings because they do not buy into the social contract.
Right.
By not buying into the rules of a society and purely acting out of their own in-the-moment actions, this and that.
Right.
They become so fucking scary, and I think Mark Hamill had a big part of that because we grew up on Batman animated.
Well,
that's almost where all of our heads jump to first.
Well, I'd say that it's that. I mean, I'd go back further. I mean, it's Cesar Romero. Like, Cesar Romero made it commercial. Like, even Jack Nicholson was not that threatening. He was a mob boss. Mob guys can be killed.
I think Nicholson is fucking... Like, I don't think anyone takes Batman 66 seriously in the oeuvre of I think we're like...
They don't.
Oh, what a fun little thing we had.
Nobody takes Batman 66 seriously in the oeuvre of, like, Batman. Like, that, yeah, that is, like, a fun little romp. But psychologically, it informs some sort of opinion we might have of a guy who dresses up like a clown. And that's, like... I mean, more to the point, like, even in Batman 89, Joker's costumes still have that Cesar Romero vibe. Like, there was nothing about what he was wearing that, like, made me think, oh, that guy's probably dangerous. Like, that was, like, the thing that was the thing when they did The Dark Knight that was different about Heath Ledger, was there was a lot about what was going on with Heath Ledger's makeup and his costume that felt more on edge. It felt more dangerous. Like, they talk a lot about, like, the development of the makeup, and, like, that was supposed to symbolize, like, sort of this infection almost. Which works, and it plays. I mean, like...
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm not here to take shots at Ledger. What I think, though, is that when I saw Ledger, and this is the new standard for Joker, right, is Ledger and Phoenix and Leto. We'll fucking throw that one in there. It's almost these tryhards, right? It's, we can't get Joker to be scary and crazy enough without trying hard. What I think Nicholson did, and the different thing in Nicholson, too, is we had time before the Joker turned.
Right.
To see that he was a scary fucking guy before he turns.
Right.
And that he just loses his last bit of inhibitions. But if you go back and watch that movie, he's a scary fucking character in that movie,
well, yeah.
right?
I mean,
and so I think now
we're... the jump. Like, I think that's the main thing.
But that's what I mean. Now we're trying to do this with makeup. You know, even Joaquin, it's like, I'm too insane to do eyeliner correctly, right? And that's fine. What I think is different in this one is, with Heath Ledger, we never did the before. Joaquin, it's almost all before in this movie.
There is no...
And I think that's so wildly important.
I also don't even think that, like, the end of this movie is an after. I think the whole movie is before. It's, like, truly an origin story. Like, the origin of it all, it takes place within this movie. I don't think you really get to the after, ever. What you get to see is, like, the chrysalis, essentially. That's really kind of like where this all crystallizes for me, is like that ending after the part after, you know, he goes on the Murray Franklin show was like, that's like the crystallization of the entire story, is here's a man who wouldn't take it anymore. Like, there's about 5 movies I would say are combined into Joker that I would look at and go, got it. This is, you know, I would say it's like Taxi Driver, a little bit of Network, a little bit of King of Comedy. There's just a lot of Scorsese vibes. There's a lot of this, like, there's a lot of neo noir going on. There's just it's like it's a movie that's a student of all these other films, more importantly. And I think that's probably the thing that kind of turns me off from it a little bit, is I see a lot of other movies that I like. But the thing that makes me come back to the well is Joaquin Phoenix. Like, this is like a career performance.
Right. And that's where I settle on it too, is I feel like so much of the structure of it and the message, if you would even say it has a message, don't land for me hardly ever.
No.
There's this weird, at the end they try to tie together all these messages, and it just didn't feel like it matched the journey I was on. But during the movie, like I said to you, this movie to me is just Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah,
right?
That's another one. That
everyone says Taxi Driver and this and that. This is so much more theatrical and depraved in a way. I think it plays more like Henry.
Well, there's a lot of that in there too, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, like, my brother had the weirdest concept. He's like, yeah, it reminded me of when I watched Passion of the Christ. I was like, what?
Right.
He's like, yeah, you just watch this guy just get fucking brutalized joylessly for a really long time. And at the end, you just kind of go, well, that was for nothing.
Right.
And I was like, well, I think you missed the entire point of the Jesus Bible story, but that's neither here nor there. But, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. To me, is Joaquin Phoenix is so unbelievably captivating and enchanting. You're willing to suffer some of the other things in the movie that, to me, just don't matter as much, right? Like, one of the weirdest decisions in the movie to me was the Thomas Wayne portrayal.
Yes.
This really bothered me, if I'm being 100% honest. Making Thomas Wayne a legitimate, straight-up fraud and an asshole.
Right.
Right? And people can say that's not the case, this and that. Show me a scene in that movie where Thomas Wayne has a redeeming quality. He's a wealthy man who, all we know is that Penny worked for him at one point, was fired because, she's unhinged. Fair enough.
Right.
He calls everyone in the city clowns if they're not wealthy. Punches Joaquin in the bathroom, and before that's kind of got a surly attitude anyways. The kind of guy who's tired of dealing with it. I'm the only one that can save you. Would take his wife and kid to the movie theater in the middle of a riot? Are we to believe that riot completely formed an hour?
I gotta tell you, yeah, during Zorro the Gay Blade, no less. I gotta tell you,
I mean, those movies were not 3-hour-long movies, I'm assuming.
I gotta tell you, I take, like, this is actually leading into something that I walked out of the theater like, fuck Todd Phillips. Because this is like a big problem I have with this movie is Todd Phillips spent so much time in the press talking about this isn't a comic book movie. This isn't that kind of thing.
Right.
We're not making a comic book movie. And how dare you decide to include a huge piece of comic book, probably the biggest piece, honestly, of comic book iconography in your film. You fucking, I wish I was making a superhero movie, motherfucker. Like, we talk about...
I don't even know if it's that. It's just not only that he showed it, but what was the point of it?
We talk about this on this show every time they come out with a fucking Batman movie, which is, this is the fucking scene every director wants to shoot. Like, there's no
every writer, every artist, everybody wants
to do this scene, which is the Wayne's death. And like,
right.
But I agree, it happened, and I'm like, this is so inconsequential to the rest of this movie. You could have cut this entire thing out, and absolutely nothing would change.
But this is what I mean, though, right? By turning him into an asshole, the movie seems to be saying, and the gunman even says, you get what you deserve. And it honestly felt like Todd Phillips, from his point of view, felt that way.
Oh, yeah.
Right? This is one of the...
There's some real
exorcism
going on here.
Yeah, not to get into the other, outside political shit, whatever.
Right.
This movie does nothing but tell us that Thomas Wayne is a piece of shit, is a bit of a grifter, is not helping Gotham. They do everything they can to position him in an unworthy of his status and not good enough for helping the people.
Right.
So that when we see the common man, right, we're forced as an audience to say, well, are we with that super rich piece of shit?
Right.
Right? When Joaquin walks in, one of the best scenes in the movie to me is when he walks in as the bellhop. Mm-hmm. And he's sitting there watching the comedy, right? He wants to be the comedy on the screen, watching people laugh, and you can see him trying to have fun, trying to amuse. And you look around the room, though, and it's just these pretentious, stuffy assholes. Like, who would be there that night in the midst of this chaos, right?
Right.
It's one of those things that I think they're like, oh, this stuff happens, this is fun. No one would be there in the real world, right? This is... The way they're visually telling us that is that these people are so detached and uncaring for the real world. Now, some people might take umbrage with me and say that that's how it is now. I don't agree necessarily. I don't think you walk in there with a bunch of fucking clowns who are all sexed up, sex hormoned up after a triple murder, are going in there to watch a chaplain or whatnot.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, no one goes into... I don't know any rich people that would go in and, sit down and watch a Chaplin movie, but also, like... More importantly,
hey!
No, I'm not speaking ill of Chaplin. What I'm saying is, I don't know anyone who's going to go in after that kind of thing with this kind of civil unrest and be like, you know what, it's totally fine. We're here celebrating the arts. Like, absolutely not. Never.
Right,
not a million
but that's
years.
So Thomas Wayne is giving all this money to what, the Chaplin Foundation with the, ivory bathrooms and whatnot, and he's out there saying he needs to help them. But this is the interesting narrative consequence of that is that Todd Phillips, whether on purpose or not, has told us, the audience, that in a way, Thomas Wayne is deserving of his death.
Right.
That Thomas Wayne and those like him have helped create this Frankenstein's monster that is Gotham City, this metropolis run amok, and turned Arthur and some of these other clowns into victims who are fighting back and standing up for themselves. Right. That is the kind of messaging. I think people latch onto that and they're like, that's really smart. It's really dumb, though.
Yeah, I don't really find
it's really dumb to blame Thomas Wayne for the stakes of God. And this is where me and my friend, we were talking in the text, and he's like, I kind of like the new version of Gotham. And I was trying to explain, no, this is, Gotham essentially exists in comics not as a city, but it is this eternal womb of evil. Yeah. Right? Gotham is a catch-all for all of the worst impulses of society.
New version of Gotham. Good Lord.
I might be paraphrasing. I mean, it was a really long conversation we had. He helped me crystallize a lot of this. But in theory, I think Gotham has always existed this way. And I think story-wise, it always works better when Thomas Wayne is the shining example amongst the filth, right?
I mean,
because it doesn't make sense. Why is Bruce Wayne so instilled with a mission to save Gotham if he knows his dad was a charlatan?
Well, that's the thing. Like, the whole eat the rich routine.
Bruce is really smart. When he gets older, he'll read the newspapers and realize his dad was a charlatan.
Well, the whole eat the rich routine is kind of played out. And, here's actually something I thought of when I was walking out of the movie is I was like, think about that version of Batman for a second that gets born out of that trauma. I actually think that you can make a case that version ends up being that Aronofsky Batman where he gets raised by Big Al in the auto shop. That totally is the version of Batman I see coming out of what happened there, because that's a guy who is not accepting of his it's like Aragorn, he's not accepting of his title or anything like that. He's literally willing to be down with the dregs, that I think is,
or as his people would say, down with the sickness.
The sickness
early 2000. No.
But
this is what I mean though. It's one of those. I think a lot of the because this is the thing. The movie is undeniably beautiful, powerful, moving, emotionally sweeping, right? But I think what happens is the longer I've been from my screening, because again, when you leave, I was just, it's one of those, I can't remember the last time I was maybe Midsommar, right? Or Hereditary, where I was so just erupting with energy as a reaction to what I just saw. Yet the further I get away and the energy dissipates from your body, I was just left questioning what I was seeing. And I think it's actually somewhat childish in its interpretations, right? So there's the eat the rich. The other question I wanted to ask, right? And then, we can move on to other stuff. What did you think of the addition of Arthur's mom is a mentally sick and abusive woman?
I mean... this is going to sound bad, but if I'm being honest, I think that's a little bit of a played out routine.
Yes. Yeah, I felt the same way.
I don't look, I'm fucking me. I'm not a writer. I'm not famous. So who am I? But at the same time, this is also a pretty common trope when it comes to these kinds of characters, when it comes to these kinds of things. There is some sort of horrible childhood trauma, horrible thing going on. So to me, it validates the Joker in a way that I kind of don't want the Joker validated. That's pretty much my main issue with the entirety of the film is I don't need a definitive origin of anybody, particularly this guy.
Sure.
But what it does is gives you it tries so hard to make you feel bad for this guy. I'm I don't feel bad for someone who listen, I'm a new dad. I have bad days all the time. That's part of my life. I suck it up, I get over it, and I move on with my day. I live in an apartment with my wife and kid. What I don't do is, blow people's brains out on national television. So,
right. Well, this is something I was texting about as well. Right? Is I always like the Joker's "I'm you after one bad day" routine. Right. I think that gets misconstrued as it's not one bad day. It's not like he's Thomas Wayne and has one bad day, right? Of course, he has countless bad days. But his is the last bad day, right? The last day before you turn. So what I don't like about this edition, right, is one, I thought by this point in the movie, I don't need any more reasons to feel empathy with Arthur's plight.
No.
I don't need some explanation about the laugh, which we'll talk about the laugh more. I thought that was brilliant, right? I don't need the radiator. I don't need the abuse, the adoption, all of these things, right? What I think is actually more emotionally devastating is here's this guy and his mom who worked for Thomas Wayne, and somehow things started to go bad. That's a very realistic story in our lives. And
totally.
Arthur had a medical problem. She has medical problems. The bills are eating them up. They can't keep it up. But the things I think about are Arthur bathing his mother, right? Because in the trailer, I was like, well, that's fucking creepy. But in the movie, it's very sweet. You know, this little
I still thought it was
apartment. I mean, of course, it's weird. Like, no one wants to bathe their parent, but you would, right? Like, there's this... And that's what I mean, is that despite this horrible world that we spend all this time in the movie, there are moments in the apartment of them watching the TV show together, him dance, you know, come dance with me, mom, right? Bathing her. There are these little moments of sweetness. And I think juxtaposing that to him losing all of it by the end is more emotionally impactful than, oh, your mom was with a diddler and she was crazy and was going to slash and, you know, just turning her into a maniac for no reason.
Well, it just kind of...
To me, that didn't add anything to the story, because by that point, we're, what, an hour plus into the film?
I mean, I feel like, if anything, it kind of takes the piss out of Arthur. Like, the whole idea behind this guy having the worst day of his life, I'm like, he's already pretty much had the worst day of his life. Like, he was... The thing that brought him the most joy was being a clown, which is terrifying on every level.
Right.
And it to be taken away for something as simple as, like, trying to defend yourself after something that happened. Like, everyone shits on him all day. Like, it's just a weird pile on that really doesn't do much for me personally.
Right.
As a viewer.
But if you keep her as an actual sweet mother who's trying to make sure that her son will be okay when she leaves, right? To me, that matters more. By the time he smothers her in the hospital, I have no emotional attachment to her.
There's a real, like...
You're just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. And again, it gets back to this. This is why I don't think Arthur Fleck is the real Joker as we've read him over 80 years, because the whole movie seems to be him just reacting to things. There doesn't feel like there's a true decision moment.
No.
By the time he kills her, it almost feels narratively forced.
Well...
Because she's already died to him when he reads this file.
Right. I'd say the only...
Where's his forethought and all of this kind of things that make him the Joker, right? There is this grabbing of fate and spitting in the face of authority that I feel in this one's just done in a little bit of a kind of a sad, childish manner.
Well, it's like the Zazie Beetz stuff. I like, why is this in this movie? Like, I don't understand why this matters. Like, is it just like someone to play off of, and then you eventually find out?
I actually love that part. I loved her.
I love her, but
right.
What I'm saying is, narratively, it does nothing for me, because what it ends up doing is it does something that I already have. It already does something that I have narratively in the movie. I don't need any more of it. So, like, for me to sit there and go, oh man, I hope like when he realizes that everything, like, he's not spoken to her and all of this is in his head. Like, yeah, we know. Like, he's like, you could tell from the first time she said anything to him, it is always him talking back to himself.
Here's where this works for me really well. I think this one lands in a way that the mother didn't, right? Because they kneecap the mom.
Right.
What she represents in her character, right? There is one moment of decency that he experiences early in this movie, right? And it's her and her daughter in the elevator, and even a small smile. That goes a long way for a person who's in the dumps, right? And especially when you juxtapose it to the lady on the bus where she's like, don't talk to my kid. And he has his,
his fit.
Unreal laughing fit, right? That's just haunting. So you see this one moment, and you see the way it carries him, right? And boosts him. And I immediately knew something was up, because when he comes to the door and they just start making out, I was like, yeah, that's not a guy who's pulling that move. Something's off.
I mean...
But so you watch these moments, right? And when she comes out and he's touching everything in her apartment and she sees him, and we know, and we see him just wet and beaten and changed. This is where he's making... This is the one point in the movie where it feels like a legitimate choice, the first legitimate choice, right?
That's what I was getting at earlier, is that, like, that is the first actual choice he makes in this movie. It's the one thing he makes to leap forward, and it's so traumatic that it was wrong.
Yeah. because the mom, it feels like the movie's already erased her story, right? Yeah. So him killing her does nothing for me. But this one, I honestly believe he kills her and her child in this scene.
Oh, really?
Right? So my buddy's like, he didn't kill them. And okay, well, you don't think she immediately called the cops who are already wanting him and they're not beating his door down in the next 48 hours? Right. No one called the cops after that. Like, he killed those two.
By the way.
And what it is she was his, light in the storm. This was his chance. The only thing we see outside of his mother in that apartment that is a shining potential future. And when he realizes that was all in his head, he takes this fucking evil turn of, I will destroy it then if I can't. And it's despicable and it's repulsive. But again, this is that Joker is not a toy for our children. He is one of the scariest, most terrifying characters in fiction.
Right. I mean,
so I love that. I love that beat in the movie. I thought that accomplished what the mother did not by the end.
That beat accomplishes what we need from his real world, so to speak. Like, that part is fine. I think everything leading up to it is very, I think it's very obvious from the jump that he is imagining her talking to him. Like,
It took me a while. The making out scene was when I was like, ugh.
It was as soon as he brought up stand-up comedy, and she's like, oh, cool. Like, as enthusiastic as she was, I'm like, not a chance. Like, that woman, a single mother who lives in, like, 1981 Gotham City, no way. Not going to go out to the ha-ha hole.
I thought, sure, right? I mean, I'm with you on it. Like, looking back on it, you're like, oh, yeah, of course. But I didn't all the way disconnect from the story until the making out scene. That's when I was like, now we're in wet dream territory. Right? Like, this is not how life works out. But honestly, at the start, I didn't pick up immediately that none of this was real, right?
Well,
but I think that's a really, and again, this gets back to, and I don't want to talk about all the outside arguments. I think so many people are arguing about things that aren't in the movie, and that's annoying, right? I mean, in a way, the Joker is this kind of incel, aggrieved white man, right? I have all this talent. I should be doing this. Thomas Wayne should be my dad. I should be on the other side of the fence with Bruce. My mom said I should be an entertainer. We watch Maury, so I should be on his show. He should be. There's just all this I should be, or I'm owed something, or they don't know how good I am, right?
Which is weird.
And again, I don't think that's a bad thing, man. Those characters
I don't think it's a bad thing. What I think is interesting is that it gets what it's being painted as is a certain thing, and actually what I think it is kind of much more a reaction to what I would call millennial culture. Like, I don't know about you, but like, there's a lot of people from that generation that believe things are owed to them. Like, I am owed this because I did this and this and this and this.
I honestly think that's every generation. They just hate it in the next generation.
Right. So,
because they feel like they didn't get theirs.
Right. And I'm fine. Right? And I'm fine being that guy from this generation that hates that generation. Like, that's part of life.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, and that's a cyclical thing. But
right.
Again, I'm owed this. I'm owed that. And like, I deserve this. I'm talented. I'm special. Like, I know I'm different than everyone else. Like, there is this really potent desperation throughout the movie, particularly and obviously from Arthur, because he's not desperate to be famous or important or anything like that. What he's desperate to be is happy. And I think that's probably the scariest part of the whole movie is like what you go for and try to find in the desperation for happiness can be so dark and destructive that you can never find your way back, and you have to conform to your pursuit of happiness, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's what ends up happening to Arthur in this movie is he finally obtains what makes him happy. The problem is what makes him happy is not good for the rest of us.
Right. Well, I mean, I would even boil it down to something so much more basic, right? I think Arthur is desperate to be seen, period. Right? I think a lot of Arthur's movie is just no one looks at him. And then the only people that do look at him is to beat him. Right?
Right.
Like, the only people who acknowledge his presence are terrified of him and telling him to fuck up. I think he wants to be seen the way he is by his mother. But then again, we learn that his mother never actually sees him.
Well, I think
she sees him as this offspring of Thomas Wayne and this entertainer, which clearly he's not.
Well,
so I think maybe it's just that simple, right? That we all feel like
I think
the whole world isn't listening.
Sure. I mean, like, I guess I would say yes to that, but also he doesn't even see himself for quite some time. Like, he spends the entire movie trying to find that person. And eventually, after everything that happens with Zazie Beetz, is when he actually finally sees himself. Like that scene where the two guys show up and he fucking guts that dude. That is,
dude, what the fuck?
That might be one of
amazing.
That might be
scene.
one of the best scenes in a movie I've ever seen. Like that is like that is some truly heinous, terrifying shit. But also, like, you know what it reminded me of is the story. One of the kids who was in, and it's sad that this is the example, but like one of the kids who was in the bowling class with the kids from Columbine said, like, told him not to go to school that day. He's like, "I like you. Don't go to school today." Like that's the kind of vibe I got. And I'm like, that's sort of like the level we're at with this movie is. We see all these things that are sort of peppered from real life and these like concepts that we've seen before. And that's sort of the real terrifying thing. And I think the thing that scares people the most about this movie is that it is like all great art is really a reflection of the times and a reflection of ourselves in some way, in some form. So what's scary is absolutely that this person obviously exists. What's scary is that this person can exist to this degree. That's the really terrifying part.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the movie goes even further to say that a bunch of us exist and that we're that's their one bad day, right? Is that we're all this fucking close, right?
Right.
I mean, I guess that's the thing. The only thing I didn't like about that scene is when he lets the little guy live. I was like, it's this moment of, oh, look, he has some kind of moral compass. Well, no, he didn't. He just murdered that lady and her kid, right? They didn't do anything mean to him.
Well,
except for exist in his wet dreams. I honestly think someone would have to explain to me how the cops are not down his throat the moment he leaves that apartment if he didn't kill them.
How badly? I got this shout out Shea Wiggum and Bill Camp, who are like my two of my all-time favorite character actors. They show up in movies and do such great work. They maybe get, I don't know, 5 minutes of screen time, but goddamn if I do not believe they are cops through and through. Like, especially, I don't know what it is about.
Well, that's a whole class of actors. You just have the look of cop.
Like,
you just exude it.
Particularly, like, what's amazing to me is, like, Bill Camp's a great example. Like, Bill Camp's the bald guy. Like, Shea Wiggum's the guy who's in, like, Boardwalk Empire. But Bill Camp has been in, like, Molly's Game and a bunch of other movies. He was in The Looming Tower. But he's this special brand of character actor where he literally fits in any generic middle-class white guy job. That's for sure that guy. Like, he just is that dude on the level. And I mean, like, and that's not a bad thing. It's a compliment because I think he's a fantastic actor. But, like, the minutes he gets on screen, him and Shea Wiggum, the minute they get, and obviously, like, they're part of the major inciting incident in the movie. But, like, the minutes they get on screen are so good. Like, that scene outside the hospital where he fucking runs into the door, like, I didn't laugh. Like, I honestly was just like, I feel so terrible. Like, this poor guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the theme of the movie until he murders that lady and her kid, is I was just like, for fuck's sakes. Like, and what I like, the thing I like about the early childhood trauma, again, I don't think it needs to be done in this kind of disgusting Saw version.
Right.
Whatever the fuck happened with him chained to that radiator. The early childhood trauma that gives him this laugh. My buddy's a doctor. He told me what this actual syndrome's called. I can't remember.
But it's hard to pronounce.
Yeah, those scenes are used to devastating efficiency in this movie.
Yeah, totally.
The scene when he is laughing and crying as these three Chads are just descending on him. I mean, it's unbelievable because you can just see this man. And the subway becomes a really good visual metaphor for kind of the entire urban thing, totally. Right? Is we're surrounded by people, but we also feel totally alone and scared. And, you know, he's laughing and crying. Like, the way he does it, it's the best Joker laugh to me. Everyone can say whatever the fuck you want. This is the best because it means something more than just a cackle.
Right.
You know, the other Joker laughs are kind of this defiance in the face of life, right? Like, life has rules and guidelines. To hell with that. I will always be the court jester that shows you anything you try to do is in error because nothing matters, right? His is different. Yeah. His is a desperation to... It's this weird thing, like, to just feel his actual emotions is impossible for him.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's not even allowed to sit and process his own depression and despair and fear because it comes out in this horrific laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part of Joaquin's performance that is so impressive, right? It's kind of twofold for me because one, they have these amazing shots just on his eyes. Mm-hmm. And the amount of fury that he can portray, even when he's kind of the subdued Arthur, it's just one of those things that some actors have that you can't match it. You just stare into his eyes.
There's actually a scene early in the film that scared the shit out of me, and that was the scariest scene in the whole movie. Like, bar none, was when he walked into the guy who runs the clown company's office, and they just do this slow push in on his face where he's smiling at the guy. But Joaquin Phoenix just has those. It's the same, like, this is like akin to, like...
They do that same scene, it feels like 5 times, right? Where it's just kind of him, you don't even listen when I talk. And it's just... You can see there's something in those eyes that is so fucking scary. Well, it's scary, like they
almost... I mean, again, like, this is sort of the same thing I felt when I saw, like, him as Freddie Quell in The Master. Like, comparatively, the performances are very different, but they also have sort of this similar vibe of just, like, the bubble under the surface. But what's interesting about Arthur's bubble is, like, where Freddie was bubbling under the surface because he was trying not to drink, and he was trying to, like, become a different person altogether. What's bubbling under the surface for Arthur is him trying to be an outwardly good person, but on the inside, like, he's so damaged and so broken on some level,
right?
Like, it's pretty fascinating.
Well, here's one of the scarier scenes in retrospect, right? Is his daydream about being on Murray's show.
Oh yeah,
where he's like, I do take you, because you can see in that moment, right? This entire movie to me is the process that we all go through to put forward a false face, right? Like, that's the entire exercise of a clown. Is the painting and the covering up, becoming something else outwardly. That first scene when he's on Maury and he's like, I do take care of my mom. I do think it's all right. Like espousing these kind of great family values. Right. And he gets brought up with De Niro and kind of waves at this generic crowd of Gotham, right? The eyes and ears of Gotham. That's who Arthur thinks he is, right? And in a way, that's who Arthur could be. But then we see him get beaten at his job. We see his buddy hand him a gun. Right? We see everyone kind of not take him seriously. His boss is giving him shit. Like the scene when he's just, why would I keep a sign?
Yeah.
But they can't believe he wouldn't do it because he's fucking Arthur, right? That's just who he is. People are creeped out by him. The scene when he brings the gun into the kids' hospital is just devastating. But that's the series we see, right? Is you see these flashes of a man who wants to be what Thomas Wayne always represents in the Batman comics, is this shining light amongst the, deluge of filth that is Gotham, right? Arthur wants to be that guy, right? My mom said I was put here to make people smile, to give and that's why we like this stuff, right? The comedians and it's supposed to take us out, even if for a minute, from the struggles of just being alive, man. Life is a struggle, period. Right. And so Arthur, it's not even as much narcissism at the start as it almost feels like he's a Don Quixote on this quest, right? And the good day in Gotham is the windmill. It's just, it's not ever going to happen for him. And the scenes of watching Joaquin underneath have this trauma and realization and anger about that while trying to keep together his outward facade. Yeah. I mean, so few actors can pull that off. It to me, that's what separates this from all of the other Jokers.
Right. I mean,
it's just he's given so much more room to work.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that's the advantage of the material in general, is that this isn't really a story about the Joker as we've known him. Because to me, again, we've talked a lot about Batman and the Joker on the show, sexual and non-sexual, but mainly sexual. But like, there's a lot of story. There's a lot of story that exists in comics that, like, rarely, like, I think Brian Azzarello might be one of the only people who's written like a standalone Joker story that I think can actually hold its nut. Like, Alan Moore wrote The Killing Joke, but The Killing Joke functions very importantly as like the last Batman story. It's not the last Joker story. It's the last Batman story. So
that's almost when he would break and become the new Joker.
Right. So, I mean, I think what this movie's advantage is that, yes, it's not beholden to any, like, because there is no definitive origin of a character, but like, it's not beholden to anything at all. All it has to do is tell the story of a man who's been pushed to his limit. So you can do that with several different characters. And again, I the fact that this movie's called Joker and not Arthur pretty much inconsequential. You could call this movie Arthur, and it would be the exact same.
Arthur, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Same thing. It's
like
fine.
literally, there's
same movie.
There's no difference between like the title does not matter. Like, you know, Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix did something very smart, and they were right in saying, "Hey, let's slip one under their nose and get something out there that's like way different from what they expected, and see what happens." And like,
right.
I'm not speaking on trends or anything like that. What I'm saying is like this is a director and an actor who wanted to do something completely different that probably wouldn't be funded for any more than like $1 million at this point. Right. So why not? Like, why not show people something that they haven't seen before? Or have.
And that's what I like about the movie is that in a way, while not being kind of true to any of the message or heart of the characters of Gotham or the movies, if that's how you have to get this movie made, I'm for it, man. Because it offers I don't know that it offers a completely fascinating lens on the Joker, but it is this interesting performance about a villain, right? And where a villain comes from. Again, I don't see this character as the Joker to me, because there's not that extra level of madman. I mean, the interesting thing about this, I keep asking myself, is twofold, right? Does having Bruce and Thomas Wayne in the movie or the name Joker add any value to the story that I saw on screen? No. You could call it, Ricky, Little Bobby, and, Tiny Tim, whatever. The movie doesn't change at all. Whereas if you do The Dark Knight and Bruce Wayne can never put on the Batman suit or have the Batmobile, this and that, like that movie falls apart. It doesn't exist anymore.
Totally.
This one is not like that. No. We're just talking about 3 names in the name of a city. Nothing else is affected or changed by that narratively. Right. But I still think it's a really valuable exercise, again, in examining Joker is not our friend Mark Hamill from our cartoon days. This is a really fucking scary, depraved guy. And again, I think in a different way than how Arthur's portrayed in this movie, but I think those are helpful tools. I guarantee you now there are people that will go on to make more Jokers and Batmans that will be influenced by this kind of the level of extra humanity that this Joker
I think
has.
the beauty of taking a creative license like this and really like taking it out for a ride, like not holding back, which is something that I think is really important to remember about a movie like Joker. Like Joker's not holding back anything simply because of brand awareness, which I love.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to. It's something we've asked from like everybody, but we obviously know there's some restraint in certain areas of the Disney world. But it nevertheless is one of those things where when I look at it and when I watch this movie, I see a great lightning rod to make other movies like this. We've talked a lot about superhero movies in general and comic book movies using movies we've seen before as like their general lens of filmmaking. Like Captain America Winter Soldier basically is 3 Days of the Condor. And, we have a lot like that's probably the best example I can think of like using a version of a movie and taking it and really making it work for your genre in general, even though it's not really your genre. This is a great example of taking a movie that we've all seen before, about 5 different times, like 5 different types of movies we've seen before, and putting it all into one movie that's a great character study about anybody, any one of us. Like, that's like the scary part, and that's why there's been so much unrest, and that's why it's been so uncomfortable to sit in that theater and watch this, because this guy's out there. Not necessarily him particularly, but that there's someone who has had to deal with this.
I think this is the most intelligent part of the movie to me is this is not a Joker movie. This is a Batman movie, right? That in a way, we're not seeing an inversion of the Joker that gives us new perspective. This is the inversion of the hero's journey.
Right.
Arthur legitimately thinks he is a hero on a quest, right? To bring light and happiness to Gotham. And watching what happens when Gotham City continually rejects him. And again, I don't think it's Gotham. I think it's Arthur, obviously, right? He takes no responsibility for his behavior in this movie whatsoever. Right. But it feels faded, right? I think this is the dark hero's journey. That what if halfway through the movie the hero says, my only course of action is destruction? Right. It's more of a Punisher movie in a way than a Joker movie. And I think by shifting these perspectives a little bit, it lets us, because that's, at the end of the day, when I see Iron Man 3, I don't learn anything really new about Iron Man as a hero or a character. Right. I'm just having another 2-hour romp with my buddy, right? This one puts me in a headspace where I have to really spend time debating the Joker as a character from this movie, from all the movies past, from all the comic books I've read. I spend a lot of time pondering what this character is and what it means and why it is so emotionally impactful to me.
Well, I mean, I think
that's the value.
Right. And I mean, like, in essence, and I have to kind of eat some crow here, in essence, though, by doing so, Todd Phillips makes the most comic book related comic book movie of all time. Because when I read comics, and I know we've talked about this, and I know that you think this too, when you read comics, we're not just reading to continue the story, we're reading to learn something, not just about the character, but about ourselves. I don't read a book if I don't think I'm going to learn something that I didn't think I already knew about myself. So for us to sit down and watch a DC-related movie about a supervillain, like the birth of a supervillain, that's something I didn't know about that character, even though it might not be the Joker that I'm familiar with. It's something I didn't know about myself, though. Like, am I capable of having that kind of bad day? Am I capable of having to laugh myself into, anything? Like, that's like a huge... I think that's like probably the greatest accomplishment of Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is that this movie takes you to a place where you have to think about that kind of stuff, and you really have to kind of you really have to like turn up the gas a little bit. You can't just sit back and relax and let them do the thinking for you. And look, I like going to those movies just like everybody else. Look, I like going to the Marvel movies. It's fun. But I also know that I don't have to like do a whole lot of the heavy lifting. That's what...
Right. But you're like, I don't need to see Ant-Man ever again because I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I know we're not going to break new ground with Ant-Man. Right. What we talked about a lot is, to me, comic books are... One, I like thinking about the classic good versus evil, right? Why do we ever keep going, right? Why do we persist? And secondly, it's forced introspection. That's what the best comics do. They make you ponder really big things in the most fun way. And this movie accomplishes that, right? And I think when the movie's sitting there making us examine, well, is Arthur a villain? Because we know what's coming. We know that he's unhinged when he kills those 3 Chads. Right? Is that right? Is that wrong? He took the law into his own hands, but they were beating the shit out of him. It felt like they were about to assault that lady. So it puts this criminal action in a good, bad, do we need to fix the whole... Like, those moments are really good. What I think happens for me is I think by the end, when Todd Phillips starts injecting a little more of his lens, the movie gets a lot dumber and makes me sad, right? Like, the whole monologue on the Maury show, to me, didn't really ring very much of the chaotic nature of this man who's broken and given up. Because he starts, you were going to be mean to me. No one's nice to each... Well, bitch, you just murdered 3 people in your apartment building. You murdered 3... Like, you're not being nice to people either. It's just... And again, he's delusional. But once that speech starts, I was kind of... Because if he kills himself, right... That's more of an introspective act of defiance. I thought that was... I was really crazy about that part.
I think killing Murray Franklin is purely plot. Like, that's the problem I had, is...
Well, I think it's to solidify that he's actually the Joker, right? That he pulls off some kind of big crime. But the Joker kind of grandstanding on the TV... Like, the moments when he stops in his Joker outfit and kind of dances, like, he does it the one time in the bathroom after the kill. He does it a little bit on the Maury show. Mm-hmm. I mean, haunting imagery. But his speech, Maury using him, kind of putting the media at fault for, oh, you love mocking. It's like, that's not Maury's fault. Nothing that happens here makes Maury a bad guy.
I think it's really, like, sloppy, like, sort of sloppy grandstanding on the behalf of, like, that's... And again, it's not like, I don't think it's bad writing necessarily. What I do think, though, is it's a means to an end. Like, that's, you.
But what they did was they took the imagery of Joaquin kind of floating in the void, right? Like, it's the sunken place, right? Like, Joaquin just floating, and watching him is captivating and lets me ponder with him, take the journey with him. When you start laying out your manifesto verbally, now I'm forced to grapple more with a specific idea rather than the big concepts of what's happening to this man. I thought the talk show was actually a really poor device for the story. I could have done without that. I thought the story between him and Thomas Wayne, that's what you're driving me towards, right? don't use Maury as a stand-in for Thomas Wayne, the wealthy 1% of Gotham. Put it on Thomas. If you want to do asshole Thomas Wayne, use him.
Yeah.
And then, so we have the kill on the talk show, and I was like, all right, his manifesto speech didn't do it for me. I loved watching him in the back of the cop car, just kind of look at the anarchy, right? This brightened up Gotham, and seeing that he's inspired this nonsense. Because in a way, now that he's killed Arthur and become Joker, people are seeing him, or at least the way he wants them to. That part is great. Now, they do a shot that I thought was pretty bad. When they crash the car and they pull Joaquin out, I was like, did we really just do the Jesus image?
Yeah.
Like, we're really going for the Jesus Robin Hood image that the Joker has. And again, because they pair it with the Thomas Wayne getting what he deserves, quote unquote, right or wrong, they do try to lay groundworks that Arthur is somewhat a victim and that Thomas Wayne somewhat deserves it by doing the then Jesus imagery and the Robin Hood imagery. While Robin Hood is standing on the car and he's looking around and he does the smile, it's visually arresting. Beautiful, beautiful work. But the images, again, kind of belie what I think a lot of this movie is doing.
I think...
because I think then you're taking an exact point. You're focusing my mind in a little too specifically on... This is somewhat a heroic act that we just watched, which I just don't agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I think, making it... putting too fine a point on it might be the, crux of the argument in a lot of the moments in this movie. Trying to make a stand and make a point in that manner is not how this movie should function, because that's also, again, speaking to the character and not how the character functions.
Yeah, well, he even says, I'm not political. He is just this broken narcissist who wants himself to be seen. And once he starts his political ideology, it kind of works in the Maury monologue, because he's not political, but he's kind of doing a politician's speech. Right. But this is, if he's just watching the fires and we see a creepy Joaquin Phoenix smile in the back of the car, do we not get all of the same information without the, and I get it, the shot's fantastic of him on the hood of the car.
Sure.
But do we not get the exact same emotional and narrative impact without the Robin Hood and Jesus image? I mean, they pull him out, he's literally in the crucifix.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Matrix Revolution's bad. I
mean, it's such a beautiful shot that it would be a shame that we never got to see the shot. But it's also just, it's the exact same thing, him watching people taking his false image to Gotham and tearing the city apart. I don't think you need the Robin Hood Jesus imagery. I don't think you need Thomas Wayne being killed, because he deserves it. It felt unnecessary. And then we have this end cap with the psychiatrist.
Oh, yeah.
That's a weird one, because I read online that this is the worst hot take that I read every movie, which I'm pretty guilty of myself with science fiction, but Arthur was in the asylum the whole time, right? When he talked to the first social worker and he headbutted the glass, that's him none of this happened. Come on, guys. That's never good. I'm guilty of it myself. It's never a good take. Let's pretend this is happening.
This isn't St. Elsewhere. Let's not do that. I absolutely despise that take. Those kinds of things are annoying to me. But what I think really is the case is that actually might be probably one of my favorite comic book beats, is literally him escaping. That happens all the time.
Well, it was cool because it's subtle. It shows his mind shift is shifted a little, right? I'll tell you a joke, but you won't get it. And him kind of meandering down the hall and then doing the Scooby-Doo run with orderlies. Yeah. It's fine. Well, it was cool. It was beautiful. I mean, I think that's the problem, right? Is so much of it is beautiful and amazing just to watch Joaquin do anything. But I think the ending has they take it from Joaquin flailing in the void to Todd Phillips is going to teach us something. I had mentioned to my friend that when it pulls back on the row of 9 TVs, and it's the news and it's Murray, and look at the press, they love tragedies, which, I mean, obviously they do. They're still trying to incite a Joker shooting, it feels like.
Yeah.
But it just felt like a stupid point to make it this moment of the movie, right? It just felt like something added in that had nothing to do with where we were.
Again,
they're trying to blame Murray and the rich and the media for Arthur and Gotham's plight, and it's just bullshit.
Again, It's called a
It's just bullshit.
It's called a character study. It's not a social study.
Right.
It's a character study. Yeah. Like that's like the most important thing about the movie is like as soon as you start widening your lens out a little bit into other things around Arthur, that's when things get a little foggy and start getting a little muddy and start getting a little preachy and like kind of get a little not worth watching. But once we get right back into Arthur's world, I'm enamored. I'm in. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing is it's just one of. I was trying to think. I mean, by the end of time, this will probably be a top 10 favorite performance of mine. It's just unbelievable. The way that Arthur contorts his body constantly, shrinking in and really kind of flexing. The way he's constantly leaning back to stretch and be bigger, more noticeable. The getting bigger and the getting smaller. I mean, he just does so many brilliant things in this movie.
I mean,
and again, it's not necessarily the Joker. It's definitely not Gotham or the Waynes. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
I think what you said, it captures the essence of the best comic books, which is an entertaining way to look at some of the most important, scary, ethical dilemmas ever. And the people who sit there and just rip on it because, yes, Arthur reminds us a lot of these incel fucking virginal shooters. Yeah, he does.
Yes.
But you know what? Those people fucking exist, right?
I mean,
to not watch it because of all the other world stuff, you're missing some amazing art.
I think confronting what's scary and confronting what terrifies us about the world we live in is what makes great art. And I don't always think that, but I think in the case of Joker, yes, 100%. And you have to confront that so that you can know. So that you can know that about yourself.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful piece of work. Again, I don't think, I mean, people are so extreme, right? It's that, it's the masterpiece. Yeah, it's all right.
It's fine.
Oh, it fucking sucks and we shouldn't watch it. It's hideous. No, that's nonsense.
That's not
true. When it's working, right? When everything is clicking, it's all the way up here, right? Some of the best visual, powerful imagery ever. And then there's a scene where they play the Pro Sports Jock Jam song as Joaquin Phoenix dances down the stairs, and you're like, well, they're still making some really bad decisions. That's kind of the mixed bag. Of all the songs in the universe you could have picked, that has to be the worst
fucking
choice in that moment.
Glitter. Come on, man.
It's just such a bad, stupid choice that doesn't fit this world at all.
Why wasn't it?
Does Arthur really rock the jock jams?
Why wasn't it just? I was shocked it wasn't like a Sinatra's version of "Send in the Clowns." Like they fucking sang it in the middle of the movie. The fucking Chads did, and I'm like, just
when you're smiling. How about? I mean, there's so many songs that are a little spot on lyrically.
Put on a happy face,
but
like I mean,
anything other than a jock jam song. But that's what I mean. This movie has really good filmmaking. It has some really bad decisions. I think the more you start venturing into Todd Phillips' mind, away from Joaquin's mind, it suffers a bit. But, at the end of the day, I think this is a fucking A- movie overall. I think, weirdly enough, I think this will be the comic book movie I come back to more than any other.
Yeah, that makes sense. That tracks.
I think there's just a lot, and it's me personally that I kind of veer towards these darker movies. This is the kind of
comic book movie that winds up on Shudder, so
right. I mean, it's a fucking horror movie, man. But that's what I like. I like sitting there and just spending uncomfortable time pondering these bigger character flaws, and I think this movie has so much more time for me to actually actively be participating and emoting than your average comic book movie. I can't think of any other comic book movie short of Howard the Duck that I will end up having watched more than this by the time I die. And I think that's really important.
Not entertaining that. Anyway.
Are we you want to watch it again?
No.
You want to do it?
We already did it once.
It's not, again, I know for most people it'll be too hardcore to be their favorite comic book movie ever. Most people prefer Marvel. I'd rather do this again. I think I can honestly say it's my favorite comic book. Because even The Dark Knight, I don't really think that's very Batman, right? The Joker's closer to what the Joker is while doing his own thing, but I don't think that's Batman in that movie, right? Batman never just wants to quit and have a girlfriend.
Yeah, the Nolan Batman just wants to have a girlfriend.
So they all take their own, they all take their own liberties with the characters. This one just happened to be fascinating, and anytime I get to spend with Joaquin Phoenix just going for it, all the way in.
I'm down.
All the way in.
Guys, we hope that you go see this movie. We hope that you listen to this show and obviously it's very spoiler filled, but at the same time, like, we really didn't tell you anything that you probably didn't already know about what's going on in this movie. It's important to see these kinds of things for yourself, though, and form your own opinion. But
yeah,
thank you for listening to our show about it, because I don't want to tell you how to like a movie, but we definitely want to tell you what we liked and did not like about this movie.
We want to talk to you about it, man. Hit us up in the comments on Nerd Alchemist, plural.
Guys.
You'll find it there. You can hit us up on Twitter, Instagram. If you want to fight with us, you think we're dumb. I think my buddy used the phrase, did they hand out woke goggles at your screening? If you think that's the case, you know I loves a good fight.
Let's do it.
You guys can be the fat guy and the dwarf, and I'll be old skinny Joaquin with my skeezers.
Yeah.
Let's battle.
Guys, as always, catch us on all your socials. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Tell your friends about us. We like doing this. We want to keep doing it. I don't think anything's going to stop us, but we would love for you guys to tell all your friends.
We don't want to have one bad day.
And for the love of God,
audience.
Please go over to Film Alchemist and listen. Every day this month we have a show, right? Every day?
Every weekday.
Every weekday this month we have a show.
We're not maniacs.
Every weekday this month we have a show. We're watching all the Friday the 13th, all the Nightmare on Elm Streets. I think today is Tuesday. We released Dream. Which one was today? Dream Child was yesterday.
Today was Freddy's Dead. By the time you'll be hearing this, it'll be New Nightmare.
Yeah.
Wes Craven's New
Great
Nightmare.
one. Guys, that's our other show. Also, small note. Friday through Sunday, I will be at LA Comic-Con this week. I hope to see you guys. I'll have stickers. I'll have a special preview booklet for a book we're all working on together. Please stop by my booth. And unfortunately, I don't have any panels this time, but hey, them's the breaks. Guys, from the Long Box Sessions, I'm Alex Dandino.
I'm Josh Griffin.
Make sure you have one good day. One good day.
Yeah. Don't be a dorm room poster, guys.